Welcome everyone to droidCon Online. This is our first of our series. This is the first of our Jetpack series and the first webinar that we're offering as part of a larger droidCon Online series with four major series in the works right now. We'll have building upon this series here on Jetpack, we'll have two more coming online to cover many more of other exciting things in Jetpack. Our next series, which I'll tease a little bit with another slide here, is our Advanced Kotlin series. We have a multi-platform series of events coming up where we'll cover Flutter, Kotlin multi-platform, and then we have something that we're calling hands-on and in-depth, and that's kind of our catch-all topic where we're going to talk a lot about hands-on, doing hands-on coding together, lots of joint work together with the audience, with the speaker, and we're going to present a lot of exciting topics there. So we're really happy to have everyone joining us today. Want to introduce our speakers. They're still live on the cameras. You should be able to see everybody. Our first speaker today is going to be Marco Plancona, developer evangelist from Twilio, talking about jetpacks for you and I. We figured that Mark would be great to kick this off today. He's really going to be talking a lot about what all we can do. And it's a good overview, I think, for us to dive into these topics. And then with Divya getting more specific into Camera X. And then we're happy to have Gardner here, a developer and instructor from Big Nerd Ranch as well, talking about how to become a composer using Jetpack Compose. So we're going to get into this real quick because you're here to hear them and not me. A couple of housekeeping issues. Love for everybody who's joined us to go over to slido.com and put in the code 92633 to join. The reason we're doing this is because we have so many people joining that it's going to be impossible during the 10 minutes Q&A that we have for each speaker to filter through the questions. Slido.com will give you the ability to post your question there, and you'll be able to very quickly see if somebody else is asking the same question. If they are asking the same question, vote, give it a thumbs up, vote on it. And what we will do at the end is filter through the questions that receive the most votes, where we think the most urgency is, and we will try to answer those in the time allotted. If our speakers have time and stick around after, we can try to answer questions, but we're going to be able to, we want to stick pretty closely to that 10-minute time period. So we're going to try to get the best and most frequently asked questions there. So please take a minute. Also in your chat window, if you miss it, because I'm going to change slides, Uli, one of our co-organizers here today, is going to send a link, and you should see that in your chat window or your question window on your interface as well, so you can directly access the Q&A portion for this event. The question that comes up, we will have all the videos from this particular webinar online and archived by tomorrow at droidcon.com, and also transcripted, so you'll be able to get audio transcription as well with your video that'll also be indexed and searchable, all on droidcon.com. To quickly tease what's coming up next week on the 30th, we have on April 30th our Advanced Kotlin series with Ash Davies, Dmitry Sitnikov, and Surya Shah, and we're kicking it off as well with an overview on refactoring legacy code with Kotlin, and then diving into some more specific topics. So we would love for all of you joining us today to see you again on the 30th for that as well. So without further ado, that's it for me. I'm going to turn the time over to Marcos, and Divya and Brian are going to shut off their cameras. I will as well, and we'll put Marco here as the presenter, and he can take it away from there. So. Okay, Marco, you should be ready to go. You're the presenter now.
Yeah, just getting there. All right, you should all be seeing my my Android Studio screen here. I am just going to flip to my slides because that's what you want to see first. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Marcos Plancona. I serve the developer evangelism team at Twilio. I have been an Android developer for many years. I know you know where to find me on the internet, but I just wanted to make sure there's some information about me in here. Also, some information about Twilio. Twilio is the company I work for. If you don't know Twilio, Twilio is a communications platform that helps developers like you and I to add communications into your applications, such as like text messages, chat, video, and anything to do with communications here. So you've probably used Twilio in the past, but you don't know. If you've used something like Lyft or Uber or Airbnb, for example, it's all using Twilio on the back end. But that's enough about Twilio. I wanted to also let you know I am an Android GDE, and I am very, very passionate about this thing called Jetpack, which is what I'm going to be telling you about today. But I want to start like very, very slow here, and I want to start by telling you a story, okay? So this is the story of the year 2017, and because we're talking about 2017, I kind of want to change these slides and say this was a long, long time ago, 2017, because we're talking about tech years, okay? Back in 2017, here I was writing code just like this. So I was getting my instance state just like this. And I imagine that if I could ask for some of you to like raise your hands, you would say, yeah, I still do things this way. The other thing that I was doing is I was also building camera applications back then. And again, if I could ask you to raise your hands, I'm sure you would say, yeah, I'm building camera applications, or I used to build some camera applications. And like just to kind of get started, when it comes to camera applications, for example, I think you've all seen something like this, okay? Because building a camera application is super easy right now. Well, it used to be like super easy. It's easier now, but it used to be super easy because building a camera application basically means, well, you create the camera manager, then you set up the camera ID, then you set up the camera output, then you set the transformation matrix, so text review, and then you start a background thread, then you open a connection to the camera with a given ID, and then you set up the image buffer size for the text review, then you start the camera module, and then you start the camera preview. That's easy, right? Does anyone else here get a mild anxiety? Yeah, I'm sure if you could raise your hand, you would. I'm sure if you could, drink some conference water right now, you would. And yeah, so that's the kind of thing I used to deal with, okay? And then came Google I/O 2017. So that's, talking about old markers there. Google I/O 2017, when everything changed, because back at Google I/O 2017, they announced the architecture components. So back then, architecture components was the name of it, which later just came to be part of the Jetpack family. And I remember listening to Mike Laren back then, and Mike Laren talked like specifically about Jetpack architecture components, but he used terms like scalability, and he used terms like life cycles and ORMs. And backwards compatibility, and like especially on the backwards compatibility, I remember back then being kind of like this, like, yeah, so I don't know about this. And so basically I did what most people did, which is nothing. I remained skeptical, and I was like, I am not gonna adopt this thing. So Google I/O 2018 came about. And Google I/O 2018 just absolutely changed everything for me, because at Google I/O 2018 they announced what the Jetpack components are, like what is included in Jetpack components, and it was really interesting because you had stuff like architecture components, you had behavior, you had UI and foundation, and the premise was you could standardize Android development. So if you use emojis on your application, for example, here's a way for you to do emojis. If you use fragments, there's a way for you to do it. Navigation, super interesting, because like everyone sort of like does navigation a different way. Paging and room for databases, and it's like, wow, there's like one way of doing things. And I know that if Android Jetpack is a new thing for you, and it was a new thing for me as well, you want to start slowly here. But you not only want to start slowly, but today, if you're not a Jetpack fan, I am going to turn you into a Jetpack fan. So we're going to be changing this. Let's start with the basics, because I think if you've been an Android developer even if you've been an Android developer for a week, you will have seen something like this, which is an applications lifecycle. So we'll look at how this is a look of how life cycles actually work in Android. Again, you have seen this before, but if you remember in my previous slide, we talked about the saved instance. So let's just go back to my previous slide where we talked about the saved instance. Let's say you have an application and your application looks like this. So you have your saved instance, but let's make it a bit more real. So instead of like saving game states, we'll make it a bit more real and we'll turn that into a number generator application, because that's the kind of thing you want to build, right? If you want to go into the Play Store, this is where the money is. You create a number generator application. And also, notice that it generates a number between 1 and 42, which, these are all the numbers you want. Now, we have this application, we have the methods on create, and usually if I had a regular audience, I would say, so what happens when I turn my phone? And there's always going to be someone clever in the audience who say, well, when you turn your phone, that number changes. And some people go, oh, removing cursor from the screen. Yeah, absolutely. So some people go, oh, like the number changes. And the reason the number changes is this is expected, okay? Because every single time you change the phone, this is called a configuration change. So you get your phone, you've got your phone on your hands, you get your phone, you turn, and that's a configuration change. So every single time this will generate a new number for you that is between 1 and 42. So already the behavior here is slightly different than one would expect, because one would expect, okay, so when I turn my phone, nothing changes, I still get the same number. But no, configuration changes cause your phone to change that. And obviously I will say here, like I'll leave a caveat here, which is I could very easily just have done some like shenanigans with my codes and says, no, I'm gonna save that state. And then if you turn your phone, like the number doesn't change. But I will continue and say that what I've been using here is the saved instance state. And for the specific case of saved instance states, the amount of data should be kept small, because the system process needs to hold on to the provided data for as long as the user can ever navigate back to the activity. So let's say you had an activity and you had like a bunch of navigation in there. When the user returns, you still want to keep that same number in there. So all this is kind of like bundled inside the memory. But there is a recommendation, and this is a recommendation by Google, which says you can only store 50K of data. So you can absolutely go over 50K of data, but that's not recommended. So if you phone Google and say, hey, I'm storing 60K of data and my application's crashing, or like it's not keeping space, Google will say, well, you're on your own, I'm sorry, because our recommendation is 50K of data. Now, let's look at a different demo here, because, hey, like number generators are great. Like we all love number generators, but let's look at a real demo. And the reason I want to show you this real demo is I want to show you why this stuff is important. So I'm going to bring my cursor back to my screen, and I'm going to show some code that I've written in here. So what we have in here is we have a very, very simple application. It's got an activity, it's got a class. This is a data class with some results. And what it does is it goes into an external API, that's the Pokemon API, and it gets some Pokemon information. I've got my clients in here, and what I'm doing is like, I'm actually debugging everything, okay? So I wanna make sure that I can see everything my application does. And to show you I'm not cheating, I am gonna show you my phone in here, which hopefully we can get on the right light. And I am gonna relaunch this application. And I want you to see what happens when I relaunch. So basically it just goes into the internet, it just goes into pokeapi.co, and it downloads some data, then it gets that data and it just pushes to my phone. However, what happens here is you will notice that when I turn my phone, that's a configuration change, something happens, and yeah, so it just keeps on making that same HTTP request over and over again every single time, okay? And the problem with making the HTTP requests over and over again every single time is like you are actually using real data in here. Like you are asking your whoever your customers are, whoever the people like your users are, you are actually using real data in here, and that's a problem. Now let's go back. So this is what the problem is. Now, one change that we can make into this application is we can use something called life cycles, and life cycles is a way for you to fetch some data. So I have a load Pokemon methods in here. I can fetch some data, and that data gets saved into my application's memory, but not into the on-saved instance. So I'm using a lifecycle class in here. I add a function into my application that uses live data. So whenever anything changes in my application, live data just gets an announcement here saying, hey, just to let you know, there's been a change in data. So we will pay attention specifically to the live data here and the list that comes inside our live data. Now, I obviously appreciate some people may not have used live data before, so let me just explain what live data is very quickly for you. So you have your UI in here. So this is the application example I just used, and then you have your live data object that holds the data for you. So all the data that you want to show on the screen is inside the live data object. So you can think about, like, if you wanted to make an analogy here, you can say everything that is on live data is like live data is almost like my database. Okay, so you have some data that gets stored in there. And the UI is always observing live data. So the UI is basically saying, hey, live data, if there's a change, I want to know about it and I want to get an update. So in this case, I have an API, which is the Poke API that I'm using. And whenever there's a change on the API, live data will fetch those changes. Live data gets updated, and live data will then tell my application that there's been a change. My application would then react to that change and do whatever needs to be done. So in this case, you know, some rogue Pikachu just got into the Poke API and just took over the whole thing, and everyone is a Pikachu now, regardless of like which Pokemon they are. And that's how live data works. So, but now when you look at this application here, you're probably thinking, oh, cool. Okay, so what if I wanted to be able to click on that Pikachu and see some details, for example? Like, how can I do that? So that's where navigation components come about. So navigation components are a way for you to basically do what the name says. You can do navigation using navigation components. So you can click on one of the items and you can navigate between screens. Now, the beauty of navigation is it basically handles all the data going forwards and the data coming back to you. So with navigation, you don't need to keep control of that data because the navigation components do that for you. The way navigation components, this is what a regular navigation would look like. So in a simple application, I very much like the idea of like using a standardized way. Like that's one way, and it handles navigation components handle the entire backstack for you. So when a user navigates back and forth, for example, the application just keeps track of everything. Our Pokemon application is a perfect example of something like this, because you could very easily just use the navigation components along with fragments to build something like a single activity application. So instead of having all the activities as you have in here, you could have one activity, a single activity application, and you would use just like fragments to switch things around. Now, navigation is a huge topic. Like there's a lot with navigation. And one video I would suggest watching, like if you haven't done anything to do with navigation or specifically single activity applications, there's a good talk by Ian Lake on this. So this is one I had the pleasure to see back in 2018 Android Dev Summit. It's on YouTube, and there's a link on my slides. I will be publishing those slides later as well. So you don't need to be copying these links from here. Now, navigation also has something that is, in my opinion, is the biggest selling point for me, because what you can do with navigation, and I'll just kind of give you an example here. I very often go into Stack Overflow and I look at like what are the Android developers asking the most, like what are the questions Android developers are asking the most, and I like doing this because it helps me with like creating my content. Like if I want to go and write something for our blog, for example, you know, it's cool to write about something new, but it's also cool to go and try and solve, like answer some people's questions. So I do that very often. And one that kind of like got my attention here is looking at Stack Overflow. If you look at the tab, I'm looking at the frequent tab. The question is, how do I pass data between activities in an Android application? And I went on and I clicked on this and I noticed like it's got a lot of upvotes. It's got a lot of like answers as well. There doesn't seem to be an answer that is like the right answer. Like I don't think there was one when I looked. But the most interesting thing here is there are a lot of pages and there are a lot of ways to actually skin a cat in here. Like you can do navigation in so many different ways, and like people do them in so many different ways. And I think this is the point of like using navigation components, okay? Because and again, this whole like scrolling was just one page. This is 3 pages of this, okay? So I can even run this thing back for you. In case you want to see that again. It's quite pretty to look at. But the point of like using navigation components is it's one way of doing things, and it's one way that your entire team will know how to do, and that's something I really enjoy, because in a lot of these cases, and I looked at a lot of these answers here. In a lot of these cases, there's no right or wrong. Like some people just implement things in a different way, but there's not really, oh yeah, this is the perfect way of doing. There's definitely the way I would have done it, but there's no right or wrong. And the way navigation, specifically passing arguments between navigation. So this is a quote by Laila Fujiwara, who works for Google, and the way Laila described navigation safe args, like passing safe arguments in navigation, is navigation components generates classes based off your navigation graph to ensure type-safe access to arguments for destinations and actions. So this is really cool because everything that you pass between one activity to the other using navigation components, if you use safe args, you're basically saying, yeah, this is all type safe, which is great. And implementing this is very, very easy. So in this case, I have my navigation graph in here. I create an argument, which is the argument I want to pass. And I can even have a default value. So in this case, I'm passing no, and I'm saying this is an argument type string. So on the other side, if something tries and reads an int, for example, that's obviously not going to work. So it's making it type safe, which is super cool. Then on my activity, so this is the button. Like if I had an on click, so when you rebuild your project, you will now have a directions class, which you can get an instance of. And then in this case, what I'm doing is I'm updating the name of my Bulbasaur, and I can call navigate passing the information. So again, just using a single activity application, I can just go and update the name of my Bulbasaur. And then obviously on the other side, I just get that. Like when my view gets created, I just get the name. Now, if you're in your receiving, so that's your receiving destination. Now, here's how that would look like. So I have Bulbasaur in here, and when I click on Bulbasaur, it turns that into cute Bulbasaur. So this is just like passing a string, okay? It's not changing anything in a database. It's not doing anything special. It's just passing on a string. Now, when we're passing a string with safe args, it's great. Like if we want to save stuff to a database, but we haven't done that yet. So what if we wanted to persist this? Like what if I wanted to really rename my Bulbasaur? So everywhere when I look on my screen, I see cute Bulbasaur, for example. Like what could I do if I wanted to do that? So this is where Room comes in. So there's a library for that too. And the way Room works is Room is a persistence library that provides an abstraction layer for SQLite. So if you've ever done anything with SQLite, you will know what a pain it is. Like you will know what a pain it is to actually maintain an application that uses SQLite just natively. I have used things in the past, like Realm, for example. Realm was actually pretty cool. But I do think Roam is kind of, in my opinion, Roam is the thing I've been using the most, because it kind of gets the best of Realm and it gets the best of like just using SQLite. And in my opinion, that's kind of like the way I always go with. Now, again, there are many ways of doing database interactions. I'm sure that if I go into Stack Overflow, there's like a few different ways of using SQLite. But the way you start using is, we already have a Pokemon data class, as I showed you in my code previously, and it looks something like this. I have my name for a Pokemon, and I have a URL. What I then do is I create an entity. So I wrap this on an entity, and I give it a name. So I can call my table whatever. So I'm calling my table Pokemon. So I haven't really made any changes to my data class. And I'm setting a primary key, like I'm giving it a primary key, and I'm saying my primary key, it also generates. So whenever I add a new Pokemon, it just gets a new primary key. So not doing anything special in here. But we can also rename columns in here. Like if we wanted name to be something else, or if we wanted name to be like Pokemon name, for example, we could also do that. Remember, I'm getting all this data from an API, so I obviously don't get things like an ID. But if the API had some like cryptic names, for example, I could just change that to be called something that is more useful to me. Then I create a data access object. So this is just an interface. And here is where I can go and just declare all of the things I want to do, or the actions I want to do. So I have an insert, I have an update, I have a query where I just go and select by name, for example. And the really cool thing about this, like the really cool thing about using this with Android Studio is they are all checked at compile time. And I find this really interesting. So what I mean by checked by compile time is, if I have a typo on my codes, for example, I'm gonna get an error that looks like this. So cannot resolve symbol Pokemon. So it's all checked in compile time, which I find super interesting. And then if I fix that, then the error kind of disappears. So this isn't like what Android Studio does for you out of the box. Like you don't need to do anything as long as you're using the Roam library. This is what Android Studio does out of the box. Then the next thing I need to do is I need to actually set up my database. So I need to implement my database. So I'm saying where my entities are. Obviously, I can have multiple entities. I'm giving this a version. So if I want to go and bump the version, I can just bump that number. And I set my Pokemon's database, and I say I'm using Pokemon DAO. I could have multiple DAOs as well. I could have multiple data access objects in here. And then the last thing I need to do is I just have a repository. I'm using a repository in this case, and I'm saying, here's what my database name is, Pokemon ZB. Remember, we named the table in the past. Now we're naming the database, and I am just initializing my Pokemon database, and I'm saying room.database builder. So just like really initializing it, and then I can start doing my queries. Yeah, okay, so and this is my database initialization, but I wanted to show you like what this looks like in code as well. So I'm gonna come out of my presentation here, and I'm gonna show you some of my code. I'm gonna switch to Roam, and this is like the amount of changes I've made on this application. Okay, so obviously I've created my DAO here, my data access object. I have a method for each one of the things. So I have a method for insert, I have a method for update, I have a delete, and I have a select by name. I have a repository here. My repository is basically the thing that you've seen on the slides. I'm making sure things are async and everything, and then I have my database in here. So this is not much different from what it was. I can now go and run this application, and when it finishes compiling, hopefully I'll be able to show you a little bit of like how this is working right now. Let me try and bring this here. So I have my Bulbasaur, and what I can do is I can, from the application, I can do things like I want to make this my pet, and then the Bulbasaur becomes my pet. So now I can go back, I can go look at Ivysaur, for example. Ivysaur is obviously not my pet, but if I go back to Bulbasaur, I can see Bulbasaur is my pet. And the way I'm doing this, I'm just adding Bulbasaur into my database, and I'm saying, I'm setting a Boolean flag to say Bulbasaur is my pet. Just very simple as that. So I'm not doing anything special here, but it's kind of cool that I can get database like going on my application without actually having to write too much code. In fact, like I usually do this. Usually when I do this presentation, I actually live code this part because it's so simple. But like in the interest of time and like giving people some time for questions, I just don't wanna take up all the time. Now I'll go back into my slides here. So we looked at that demo. Now, if you wanna know more, there are gonna be a couple more things going on today. So we obviously have Camera X. Camera X is, I'll say, it's probably my favorite API in Jetpack. I had a lot of fun building things with Camera X. I wrote a blog post about it, so you can check it out on my blog. And there's also Become a Composer. So I purposely didn't mention those things in my application, even though Camera X is probably my favorite library on Jetpack. I didn't mention those things because I knew Brian and Divya were gonna talk about those two things. So Brian is talking about Become a Composer. Divya is talking about Camera X. Composer is super, super interesting. It's still a bit fiddly, as you will see today, but it's super, super interesting. And I think Brian would do a good job at explaining that. With that, like I said, I will be posting those slides later. I'll put it on whatever hashtag Greg tells me to put on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Marcos Plancona on Twitter. All this code is also on GitHub. It's going to be on my GitHub account. And you can check a lot of my sorts of like answers to Stack Overflow questions, like unified answers, or even like a lot of the open source stuff that I write. You can find it on plancona.co.uk, which is my website. With that, I want to thank you, and I want to thank droidCon very much for having me. I have been Marcos Plancona. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Marcos, thanks so much. Fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you being here. We have Q&A. I'm going to have Uli change himself to the presenter so everyone can see the top questions that were voted on. We'll give you 10 minutes to answer them, and I'll bring everyone back in and introduce Divya after that.
Cool.
So feel free to fire away, Marcos, anytime.
Cool. All right, so I am looking at the first question. With multi-modular architecture, where can each module, at least one activity on the rise, is on a single? I'm not sure I really understand the question here. With multi-modular architecture, where each module equals, okay, so where each module equals at least one activity on the rise, is the single activity updated? I'm not sure I understand this question. If there's anyone else who wants to help me answer the question, because I'm not sure I even understand it. I'm gonna move on to the next question and come back to this. So the next question is there any performance differences between implementing an app with multiple activities and implementing an app with one activity and multiple fragments? I haven't seen anything like this. Using multiple fragments, in my opinion, as a developer, using multiple fragments does complicate your code a little bit. But I haven't seen any kind of like performance differences. What I would say is if your application is very complex, you probably don't want to make it a single activity application and just keep on like spawning new fragments. But if you have like an application like the Pokemon application, for example, that I just showed you, that is the perfect contender for like just using multiple fragments because you don't have many of them. I'll say if you have many fragments, then you just need to be careful. That to the next question and the questions keep on like popping around, which is really exciting. In a multi-module project, what's the best design using navigation Jetpack to go from fragment in module A to fragment in module B? In a multi-module project, what's the best design using navigation Jetpack? I'm not sure I get this. I know we're talking about a multi-module, but I'm not sure I get the question. I don't think you do anything different in here. Like I work with some applications that are multi-module, and I've been using fragments on those applications. So I don't think you do anything different in here other than just like injecting the fragment. I don't think there's anything different that you need to do, unless I didn't quite get the question. I have answered this one already. Now the next question I'm going to go to, if I'm using the same fragment in different navigation graphs, I need to update. Oh, the question just disappeared. What is the best way to map NES adjacent into a room database? Okay, I'm going to answer that because it's the one I got to read. What is the way to map? What you do is, I usually just try and map the JSON into a data class. I get my data class and I map it that way. So JSON entities into, you have a lot of like generators. I've used what I did last time I had to do this was, I've used a generator that basically takes my JSON, turns into like a Pojo, and I just pasted that into Android Studio. Android Studio obviously just translated that. Oh, there's someone saying things for. Android Studio obviously translated that to Kotlin, and then I just turned that into a data class, and that's the easiest way you can do it. Like it does, I'd say it does like 90% of the job for you. Yeah, that's how I do it. Do you think it's a best practice to use activity per feature? Oh, Jesus. I'll move to the browser, okay? Because I'm looking at the screen here, but it keeps on popping. So I'll move to the browser here. Hang on, I'm just opening it here. Is there a reason you prefer using navigation safe args instead of parcelized data class in Kotlin plus the new intent fragment.new instance? I'll say no to that. So I'm going to read the question again. Is there a reason to prefer using navigation safe args instead of parcelized data class in Kotlin plus the new intent fragment new instance pattern? I'll say no. I think that's more of a preference. If I'm using Jetpack, which is what I tend to use right now, whenever I use it, I just use safe args. I don't think there's a right or wrong in here, unless I didn't get the question right, but I don't think there's a right or wrong. Using sorts of like new intent with fragment.new instance pattern is almost like you're kind of like it's almost like you're going under the hood on the navigation safe args. So I'll say this is probably more of a preference thing than anything else.
All right, Marcus, we have time for one more question. So let's possibly two, but let's try to get two more questions in then.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, and I'm looking at my browser now because just looking at the screen here, like the questions just keep on changing. What about data binding? Is it part of Jetpack if used correctly and with any tool? Doesn't it result in untestable code? Data binding doesn't result in untestable code. No. Data binding is you can use it as part of Jetpack. Yes, I use data binding a lot. I'm not sure it results in untestable codes. I think I think most of the untestable codes I've seen is like written by developers as opposed to just using a functionality. So I would say I don't think it results in untestable codes unless you had like a different experience. Like I never really had an experience where I've used data binding, and I use data binding a lot, and I never really had an experience where like I can test all my code because of it. Cool. Yes, there's one question here that says, aren't async tasks deprecated? Yes, async task is deprecated. As I was talking about it today, like looking at my codes, I was like, yeah, I should have changed that. Yes, async tasks are deprecated. You should move away from using async tasks. There are definitely new different things that you can use. I actually wrote an entire blog post about this. So if you want to know what you can use instead, I wrote a blog post on plancona.co.uk where I talk about async tasks and their deprecation. So you are right, Mr. Anonymous. Async tasks are deprecated.
Marcos, thanks so much. Thanks also for playing question roulette with us. So we'll this is a process we're going to refine in the next, but hopefully we'll be cycling through always the top 3 voted on questions will appear on the screen. The latest question will keep appearing down below and changing. So hopefully that'll smooth out. But thanks for playing roulette with us on the questions and for the fantastic presentation.
No worries, my pleasure. Thank you everyone for having me here again. I'm happy to answer if you have a question, I'm happy to answer those on Twitter as well. So just like at me on Twitter, and I'm happy to try and answer your question too. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm gonna switch over now to Divya.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. And yes. Perfect, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Divya. I am a mobile developer with a ticket selling platform company called Game Time in San Francisco. And I have been doing Android development since almost 5 years now. Before I start, I want to really give a huge shout out to the organizers of droidCon and everybody who's here. Thanks for coming and like listening to us. So today what I'm going to quickly talk about is the Camera X library, and thanks to Marcos for alluding that it's his favorite, no pressure. But so it's my favorite too. I have been using it in a lot of apps, so let's get started. So in today's world, there are, as we all know, there are a wide variety of apps that needs camera support for different sorts of functionalities. Few cases can be the basic photo previews and capturing, social interaction, messaging, Instagram, etc. All kinds of image processing, which is an entirely new world in itself, like scanning barcodes, documents, again, photos of any sorts, filters, special effects, and so many more. And as Marcos alluded in the beginning of his talk, the pre-2017 or 2018, for that matter, incorporating camera into your app was definitely an anxious task. Now, the Camera 2 API, which is part of the Android hardware package, was powerful, but it can be tricky to get the most out of it since different and wide ranges of devices have their own specific camera capabilities that they offer, which means lots of device-specific code just to have a vast device support, focusing on nitty-gritties of tons of boilerplate code, difference in configurations based on aspect ratio, orientation, rotation, preview size, resolution. So to overcome all these problems, we have Camera X. Now, what is Camera X and why? So as part of the Jetpack library behavioral component, Camera X library allows integrating camera functionality into your Android app with just a few lines of codes and easy to use API surface. Now, internally, it still leverages the capabilities of Camera 2, which is the interface to the native camera device. But all you need to care about as a developer is the use case or the actual task with camera, instead of worrying about consistencies across different devices and lots of code. Now, it not only gives you backward compatibility support, but also uses a much simpler use case based approach, which means all you do is focus on the actual task, and the library takes care of internally accommodating that use case on the supported devices without you having to write any such specific code. It is also more focused on enabling you as a developer to integrate new capabilities and APIs to enable advanced camera features in your app. Also, CameraX has been highly optimized for its performance and size, thus making integration of camera in your app seamless and not frustrating at all. So this CameraX library allows you to bind to the lifecycle of the owner, which means no manual intervention needed for managing the lifecycle. And also, as part of the optional add-on extensions, we do get the supported effects like HDR, night mode, etc. So the several basic use cases that can be easily configured currently with CameraX are A, the preview, which, as the word itself means, lets you see the image on display before it's captured, along with capabilities like rotate, crop, scale. So all that you need to do is code-wise is add a preview view, which is nothing but an extended view on which it is rendered. The second one is image analysis, which is a use case that actually gives you a CPU accessible image, which can be passed on to different analysis algorithms like machine learning, facial recognition, or any sort of image processing through something called the analyze method. And I'll get into the coding aspects of all these use cases in a bit. The third is the image capture, which is the most obvious use case of capturing high quality images with functionalities like autofocus, auto exposure, and other basic camera manuals. It also gives you the option to choose to provide an in-memory buffer of the image or save the image to a file location through the take picture method. So also note that these use cases can be combined with one another and can be run together in one flow. For example, the basic functionality of a camera that entails previewing the image through the image preview and then actually using the image capture use case to click the photo and save it to the device. Now, the one recommendation when combining use cases is that concurrent use cases should be bound to the same lifecycle, which ensures that the camera resources are active when necessary and released in an efficient manner when not needed anymore. And again, you don't have to worry about any memory leak or anything as a developer. So now, in order to get started with CameraX use cases and demonstrate how you need to write a minimal amount of code in order to carry out the actual task, you basically just need to specify three things. A, configuring the actual use case with its own set and build methods. B, attaching listeners to specify what to do with the output data, and also binding to the owner's lifecycle, as I mentioned, which means, again, we don't have to worry about specifying start or stop methods explicitly, but it becomes the responsibility of the lifecycle owner to update CameraX to update its state changes matching the lifecycle transitions. So for example, to specify the basic use case of image capture, we only literally need this much code to have an image capture pipeline. Basically use the image capture builder method to specify the use case, and then we can provide additional configurations like target resolution or capture mode. But the best thing is, even if we don't, the API falls back to the nearest supported resolution on the device it's running, which makes this widely supported on a variety of devices. Then we bind it to the owner's lifecycle by using the bind to lifecycle method, which gives us the flexibility not to worry about the state machines. Camera itself opens when needed and released when not needed. And then finally, use this use case specific task, which here becomes the take picture method. And that also has a listener attached to it, which is the on image save listener, which lets us handle the saved image in any way we want, or also specify the error handling scenarios. Now, again, before we get into the actual coding details of each use case and other specificities, let's start with some basic janitorial details about how to get started with using Camera X library in your Android app. Now, the library is currently in beta version, which means it is almost production ready, just possibly with bugs, but it's continuously being worked on. So in order to integrate it into your app, we need minimum API level to be 21 or higher. And also, since we are binding to the lifecycle methods, we need the Android architecture components 1.1.1 or above. It is also recommended to use fragment activity or app compact activity, since they are by default lifecycle aware activities. Also, we need to add basic dependencies to our Gradle file, like the Google Maven repository, compile options, and the actual Camera X dependencies here. Now, since we are using the camera utility in our app, it is needless to say the app needs the camera permission. And so before any of the use cases are launched, we just need to ensure that the app requests for the camera permission if it doesn't have it, and also any other necessary permission like the right external storage for saving the captured photos. So as I specified before, the preview use case is all about viewing the preview of the short camera captures. And we need to set the preview use case first by configuring the preview builder and then building it. So hence the build method on it. Now the set target resolution or the set target rotation here that you see are some of the configuration methods that lets you make your use case a lot more specific based on what you want to do on a necessary supported device. Now, apart from building the use case, preview also needs an actual surface to render the frames received by the camera. Now, in order to automatically handle scaling, rotation, or translating the preview frames to match the display, the library comes with something called a preview view, which is nothing but a custom view that can easily be attached to a preview use case. So hence we use the method preview view create service provider to create a surface provider that you can then pass to the preview use case to start the preview stream. And finally, this preview use case is passed to the camera provider when it's bound to the owner's lifecycle, as indicated by the code here. Talking about the next use case of analyzing the images through Camera X, this one allows you to run any sort of analysis algorithms or machine learning over the camera images. So similar to the preview use case, we use the image analysis builder to configure the use case and then build it using the build method. And the application here implements the analyze method, which is run on frames that are received from the camera. But here there are additional configurations involved, like the set back pressure strategy, which basically determines how the images for the analysis are selected. So now this back pressure strategy itself comes with two modes, which is blocking and non-blocking. The blocking one is strategy block reducer, which means the new frames that are blocked from entering the pipeline of the executor, they're blocked until the method returns. So the frames that are received by the executor sequentially, so if the analyze method, which actually carries out the analysis or the processing, takes longer than the current frame rate, the analysis may not be updated on the latest frames. On the other hand, we have the non-blocking one, which is the strategy keep only latest, in which the analyze method always gets the latest availability from the camera. So in case of a latency, there might be some frames which might be skipped. Only when the frame being analyzed is closed by calling the image.close method, the next latest frame is received and entered for analysis. Now, the third use case, which is the image capture use case, is for capturing high quality and resolution photos, which automatically provides the functionality of basic camera controls and other utilities like exposure, focus, etc. Now, as with the other use case, again, we first configure the image capture use case with image capture builder and then build it with the build method. Now here we also have the option to decide how to use the captured image with the help of the image capture take picture method, which has the option of either providing the in-memory buffer of the captured image or provide a storage file location to store the image to. We can also customize the executors on which the image capture runs. So it can be a callback executor in which we can provide our own on image captured callback, or it can be an input output executor, which can also assist with saving the image to a file location. So Camera X is flexible enough to default to an internal input output executor in case the executor is present. Now, also we can configure it. We can also configure the captured images to be optimized either for latency or quality by having extra capture mode configurations, such as capture mode minimize latency or capture mode maximize quality. Apart from the use cases, Camera X also gives you high-level APIs to control the camera directly, and the camera automatically reflects the updated state for all of its use cases. For example, Camera X by default supports autofocus, but there might be a use case where we might need the flexibility to control the focus target manually. Now, with the traditional Camera 2 API, this needs a lot more calculations with figuring out the transformations between the UI coordinates and the camera sensor coordinates, and then calculating the focus area. But with Camera X library, it already comes with these advanced methods or APIs like surface view metering point factory or focus metering action, which automatically does these calculations, and you pass them to the camera control and it handles all these things internally. Similarly, for something like supporting pinch to zoom, Camera 2 API required us to manually figure out the transformation and crop region. But with Camera X library, there is something called a scale gesture detector, which determines the delta value or the scale factor with the user pinch value. And we can use camera control to automatically figure out the crop region and send a request to camera. So your pinch to zoom is implemented in just a few lines of code. Another example is the linear zoom slider, which again, Camera X comes with its own set linear zoom method, which just takes a slider value and does the necessary zoom transformations on its own. So which means that you can implement something like linear zoom slider in just one line of code. And the best part is that Camera X follows the principles of automatic selection, which means that it automatically provides functionality that is specific to the device and that your app is running on. So on top of that, if you didn't provide an attribute or a configuration or an unsupported configuration, it will gracefully fall back on the nearest best supported one. So again, we as developers don't have to worry about device-specific code at all. So as mentioned before, Camera X also lets you access external effects like HDR night mode that are available on specific devices with your camera. So in your app, you can query if an extension is available. The extension should be supported and be physically present on the device. And if it is available and supported, it will be enabled. Else, it will again degrade gracefully, and default is always the Camera X implementation. So basically, to apply any of these vendor extensions, all that you need to do is create an extender object, as shown here in the code. It lets you configure the builder with the extension setting, and then query for the availability of the extension and enable it if it's there. Here I have just a very basic small video of a demonstration, which is the preview functionality and then actually capturing the capture use case. And the Android, the GitHub repo for the Camera X has a lot of code there, which you guys can go and check out. And it basically covers all the use cases and gives you a live, like it gives you a lot of methods, which makes writing, which avoids writing any of the boilerplate code. And also the official, the developer and developer.android.com is the best site I felt for learning all about the Camera X library. So I know it was a very quick lightning talk, but I'm happy to answer any questions. You can find me on Twitter anytime and DM me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions right now. But thank you so much for listening to me.
Divya, thanks so much. Thanks so much. I always after these presentations, I always hate that we don't hear all the applause, and I feel like I need to applaud for everybody. But thank you so much. Are you ready to play question roulette? Because that's what you saw with Marcos all the time, but we think we've got that ironed out. So I'm going to make Uli right now our presenter, and he should be able to start with the questions that are the most popular. So here we go.
Okay, let's do it. So the first question is, does CameraX also include QR barcode scanner? I am not 100% sure if it actually comes in, it comes with a QR or a barcode scanner, but I know that the image analysis use case would be the one that would be super helpful for this, because you can basically run an own QR barcode scanning algorithm inside the analyze method, and then whatever image is being passed onto it can be scanned for barcodes or QR codes. Okay. The next one is, can the image capture work be done in a view model, and does it need to be on a UI thread? Image capture work be done in a, I believe that as far as I know, I believe that the actual use cases, CameraX library in itself takes care of the, like the basic Android principle of not blocking the main thread. So I believe that CameraX internally takes care of making sure that it is done in an asynchronous manner and not blocking the UI thread. But I can dig a lot more into this question, and I'll have all the answers, even if I'm missing out something here, on Twitter for you guys. Does CameraX address the 90-degree rotation issues on some devices? I am not sure about this one, but I will again look into this one for sure and get back to you guys. How is support for newer phones with multiple lens? I believe that I have, as far as I've used it with my Android latest phone, I've not had any issues. But again, not to forget that the library is in beta mode and it is continuously being worked on. Does it have any AI or any type of image analysis or context recognition? So again, I think going back to the same as what I would say to the same QR barcode scanning, the image analysis use case in itself is pretty strong enough to carry out any sort of image processing or facial recognition or any sort of other image analysis that we are trying to do. And I would highly encourage everyone who's trying out this library to use the analyze method in itself and see how efficient it is. Architecture component dependency is required or recommended? I believe it is required, because again, we are trying to ensure that the life cycle, we are trying to ensure that you can bind to the life cycle of the owner, and so you as a developer will not be causing any issues with manually starting the camera or closing it and leading to any sort of like memory leaks or any other errors. Do we need to import all the CameraX dependencies, or can we import only the ones we need? So the CameraX view, I think CameraX core and the view are the two that would be necessary, but I believe that the other ones can be imported on demand. I will share the GitHub repo and the slides for sure after this. Okay, the last one. As of alpha release, the take picture method does not read the correct information. You will need to import the, I believe this, I am 99% sure this issue would have been resolved with the beta release. So again, I would encourage everyone to try out the latest beta release and see if the issues are resolved. Yep. I think we don't have any more questions.
No, you got through the complete cycle. Thanks for playing question roulette with us. Appreciate it, Divya. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll have to have you back. Loved your presentation. We're going to have you back for a full-length one to really dive into some of the details. So get ready because we'll come knocking for that later on.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
Divya,
Thanks.
you have a great day. We're going to now turn the time over to Brian Gardner on Become a Composer. So I'm going to change over to him and make him our current moderator and presenter. And here we go. Brian, we should be seeing you as well now. There we go. Turn the time over to you.
There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Gardner. I am a developer and instructor at Big Nerd Ranch, and today I get to talk about Jetpack Compose. So as Marcos was mentioning, Compose is still pretty rough around the edges, let's call it. It is a dev release currently, so pre-alpha even. So things are changing quite a bit, but overall, I like it. It's a really fun way to build user interfaces for Android. So the goal for this talk, I suppose I could present, is I'm basically going to try to recreate the list view from Gmail. So there will be an individual list item for each email. I'll try to add a toolbar at the top, floating action button, as well as the navigation drawer on the side. So I think Compose is one of those things that it really is a lot better to kind of see it worked or see an example worked through. So let's do that. So I have a little screenshot of the main screen that I'm trying to build here, and I have my studio open. So the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a specific version of Android Studio. So Android Studio 4.1 is the one you're going to want. This is currently in Canary, but it's the only version that has the actual Compose tooling. The 4.0 beta doesn't have it, 3.6 doesn't have it, so make sure you get Studio 4.1. The next thing you're going to need is some various dependencies. So inside of your Android block, you can add these Compose options. This is just a Kotlin compiler version that you're going to need in order to get Compose working. You run into some weird issues if you don't have this compiler version specified, so you'll want that. And then there's a Kotlin compiler extension version as well, which you can see this is where the dev release comes in. What you'll also need is the actual dependencies themselves. So there are sort of two versions that you'll need. One is the Compose compiler and runtime. So this just makes sure that Compose can build and actually run when you're using it. And the second is the UI libraries. So this actually includes like the text, the buttons, stuff like that. So that's mostly what you'll be using when you're actually building out your application, whereas the compiler and runtime just make sure everything actually works. So in the interest of time, this will be a little bit like a cooking show. It's a little bit of stuff made fresh and a good bit of stuff I've prepared earlier. So one of the things I've prepared earlier is a data class that represents an email. So I have things like the sender, text, if the email is important, which shows this little icon over here, the receipt time, subject text, body text, stuff like that. So that just prevents me from having to build that out. Most of my time is going to be spent building the actual email view itself. So the individual row item is what I'm mostly going to be focusing on. So with Compose, there's no XML, thankfully. Everything is going to be built inside of Kotlin. So when you want to create something that shows on the screen, you need to create a function that's annotated with the @composable annotation. This tells Compose, hey, this thing is actually a view that needs to get displayed on the screen. So in this case, I just have a top level email view, which will take in my email. And as I go through, I'll actually build this thing out. Now, With Compose, I really like to start sort of bottom up. You start at your kind of most basic view components and build your way up. So I'll start there. So starting at the top, we could start with the sender text right here. So when you want to display text in Compose, there's a text function. So you just say, hey, I have some text, and I can set the text to my sender. So that will actually render whatever text you send in. Now, if I want to actually see this working, there's a couple ways I can do this. One, I could add this into my activity, throw my sender in there, run it, display it in an emulator, but that's a little bit slow. But what you can do instead is there is a preview option. So you can create a preview function annotated with @preview and @composable, and this will render this nice little preview pane over here on the right-hand side of Studio. So right now I'm just rendering my email view with a bogus email, but there's nothing in my email view, so nothing is rendering. But if I did want to render something, I could just say, hey, render my sender text. You do have to build every time to get the preview to actually work. Hopefully this shouldn't take too long, as I was working on this a little bit earlier, but there you go. So you can say, hey, my email view preview is getting rendered and I have some text getting displayed. That's great. But say, what if I wanted to modify this text? What if the default style doesn't work? Well, the good thing is the API for Compose is very fluent. So it has a lot of niceties. So it's like, hey, I want a style, I can provide a text style. The text style class has pretty much everything you would need to modify your text: color, font size, letter spacing, text decoration. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go through everything here. I'm just going to maybe tweak the color a bit, and maybe the font size, maybe you say 20 SP. So color here is a specific object. You can pass in a hex value if you want, and it'll configure that appropriately, or you can just use one of these defaults. And in my case, most of the defaults are going to work. So I just use that. The sizing here is actually pretty nice. So they provided this SP extension function on, I think, doubles, ints, and maybe number. But this basically will convert this to the style or the scale independent pixels. So it'll respect both the density of the screen and the user's accessibility settings. Now, if I refresh this, the preview isn't actually going to change because the color is the same and the text size, it's getting scaled anyways. So you're not really going to see much difference, but I messed with this before and 20 pixels seemed all right. So what I can do next is I need to provide my important icon. So this one, I already added a vector asset for this. So to display any kind of resource, you're going to want to use the icon function. You just provide an asset, and there's a vector resource function you can use to load a vector asset. So this is my important icon. Go back to code. So this will just load this asset and put it in something that can load an icon. So what I can do next is the sender text and the icon need to be displayed next to each other, along with the receipt time way over here on the right. So what I can do is I need to create another composable function to basically contain these things. I could put everything in my email view, but that might make things a little messy. So I can create another composable function, maybe call it email header, pass in the string, and then this is where I'll actually configure the important icon, sender text, and the receipt time. Now, everything needs to be displayed in a row here, and fortunately, there's a function called row, so I can just say, hey, I just want my sender with my sender string, and in front of that, I need my important icon. So I can then update this to be my email header, email sender. And then if I refresh the preview, it should show the important button in front of my text, which it does. There's a couple things wrong here. Number one, the color's wrong. Number two, the icon is actually a little bit above the text. So I can modify the color of an icon. So there's a tint property, which is really nice. I could try yellow for this. It doesn't quite look right. So I did some experimenting and just grabbed the color for the actual gold. I think it's FFFDD663. That should tint the icon. So I'll just go ahead and run that. And then my email header, I need everything to kind of be aligned in the row. So there's a vertical gravity property that you can provide. And say, hey, please center all of the contents vertically for me. So that should kind of move everything a little bit. The icon will move down just a little bit to be in line with the sender text. So the next thing I need is the receipt time. There's nothing super interesting about the receipt time, so I went ahead and implemented this already. This just takes in the time that I want it to display as a string. The reason this is a string and not like a date or a long or something is these are kind of my lowest level view components, so they should be as dumb as possible. They shouldn't do any sort of formatting or anything like that. That should be reserved for like a view model or a presenter. By the time your data hits the view layer, it should be ready to display immediately. So I'm just assuming that will be formatted for me. And then I said, hey, show me some text, and then give it a style. If I want to add this to my row, I can just add the receipt time. It's my header. So I actually need to pass in the receipt time to my header. Get that, modify that. Here we go. Then I need to pass in the receipt time. Space that out a little bit. It's a little easier to see. Rebuild that. And that should display the receipt time next to my sender text, which it does, but everything's a little bit squished together. So there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the row assumes that it only is kind of a wrap content width, so it's kind of squishing everything together. So what you can do to modify that is there's a modifier argument on pretty much every composable function. So modifiers are how you add things like padding, setting the size of something, filling up the space. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I can say, hey, please have this row fill up the max width. So it'll basically fill up its parent. So if I refresh the preview, we'll see that the row does in fact fill up all the space. Oop, not height. There we go. Fill up the width. So that'll fill up the max width, but we still kind of have the same problem in that the receipt time is still smushed up against the sender text. And how we fix this is we need to provide a modifier to the sender to tell it to take up the full width or the remaining space. So I'm going to need another parameter here. And inside of the row, this lambda basically is all of the child views you want inside of your row. But specifically, this is a row scope, which you can kind of see from this hint here. Now, the row scope defines some custom modifiers, one of which is a weight. So this basically says, hey, sender, please take up whatever remaining space is left. I need to provide the actual modifier parameter here. And I want to go ahead and provide a default just in case. So my sender doesn't have to be used from a row if it doesn't need to be. So providing this weight to the sender will basically force it to take up whatever remaining space is left. If it'll work. Oh, I need to actually apply the modifier. That would help. There we go. So once the modifier is applied to the sender, the text will basically expand out as far as it can and push the receipt time all the way over to the right, which is great. So that's kind of the email header. Next, I'm going to focus on building out the actual email view itself. So the next thing is the header is stacked on top of the subject and body text. So in the header, I used a row to stack things as a row. Fortunately, there's also a column that I can use to stack things vertically. So we say, hey, have an email header, pass in a subject and a body. Now these, like the receipt text, there's nothing super exciting going on here. It's just declaring a text, setting a font size and a color. The body is actually a carbon copy of the subject. So nothing too much to look into there. But you get to see the preview refresh and then actually see it displayed in a column. So we have things kind of getting the email views coming together at this point. Next is we need the little star to show up. And if you look closely, the star is actually in a row with the subject and body text because they're both ellipsized. So the subject and body are in a column because they're vertical, and then that is inside of a row so that the star can be in the right place. So I can add this stuff. So say, hey, row, add a column. We'll dump the subject and body text into here. And then I need a star to go in the row as well. So I have that. So say email.starred. The star at this point is very similar to the important icon. It's loading a vector resource. It's getting tinted. The only difference is I'm modifying the color of the star based on if the email has been starred or not. So I can just use this if logic. Thanks Kotlin for not having me set that twice. But once I run the star, you see kind of a similar thing. So the star is smushed over up against the subject and body text because they are only taking up as much space as they need. So I need to go back and have the column take up plenty of space. So we'll use that modifier weight trick. And another thing is the star needs to be in the bottom over here. So in a similar trick, we can use the actually the vertical alignment or gravity. Say align the star to the bottom, or align the row to the bottom rather. The subject and body are not going to be impacted by that because they're already taking up the full height, but the star will get pushed down to the bottom. Now, another thing that needs to happen is the star needs to be clickable because right now it's not responding to any kind of click events. So what I can do is the star needs to basically take in a listener and fire off the listener when it gets clicked on. So we can just say like add an on click lambda, no parameters, doesn't return anything. This is your typical click listener here. And then you can wrap your icon in an icon button. Let's name that. Maybe it's just mad. No. Oh, there we go. So we basically just say, hey, the button adds a clickable interface around our icon, so it'll fire the click listener whenever it gets tapped, so that I then need to provide a click listener here. This brings up another question. My email currently is immutable because it's a data class, but everything is a val, so I can't set any of this data. So what if I need to? There's a couple ways of dealing with state in Compose. One way is you can update your property to a var if you need the setter, and then say, hey, this is a model. So you add the model annotation. What this does is whenever a composable function takes in a model, anytime it accesses the properties of that model, it is registered to observe changes to those properties. So since I'm passing in the starred property, my email view will update if the property changes. So what I can do is, oh, I actually need a property here. So what I can do instead, this is a better example. So instead of an icon button, what you can do is there's a toggleable that you can do. So instead of just responding to a click, toggleable is basically a click with a state. So we could say it needs the initial value, and there's an on value change function. This is different because on value change requires a Boolean. So this is the flag on and off. So we'll just update that. So now our star can modify its color based on the starred, the on star click, and we should be able to react to it. This is going to be mad because I need to finish this. But I can update my email and this should be happy. So I can try to run the app over here on an emulator. So we get my little email list, and when I click on the star, it updates, which is cool. It does work. Another option you have if you don't want a mutable class here, you can keep everything vals, but you would need to wrap your property in something called a mutable state. So this is basically saying, hey, this is my state instead of the email itself, and then I can pull out the email from the state. Now, accessing the value of a state works similarly to your model. Any changes made to the state are going to cause your view to recompose. It's just a little bit more complex. I'll need a new email. Fortunately, since I'm using the data class, I can just copy it and override the fields I want, and then I can set the value like so. That will cause it to update. My email preview needs an update because it's still expecting an email. So if you need a state, there's a mutable state of function, and that'll basically wrap your model object in a state. You pass that along. I'll need this same logic in my activity to actually run the thing. So I'm now passing in a state instead of the email itself, and I can still update the star. So it's still responding to clicks, and it's still updating my view state. I like this a little bit more just because it makes me be very explicit about state updates instead of having like a mutable class, but that's kind of a personal preference right now. So in the interest of time, I think we'll keep this about where it is. I'll actually just add some padding. Let's do 16 dips. So that will just add some padding around my email view, just to be a little bit more material and make it look a little bit nicer. So there we go, got some padding. So that's the email view. So it's fairly easy to build all of these things from the bottom up. If you want to display a list, I'm gonna make another composable function called email list that takes in a list of emails. And if y'all are familiar with Android, you probably know about recycler view, and it's got a fair bit of pieces that you need to kind of put together. Fortunately, making a list in Compose is a lot easier. You just use this adapter list thing, pass in your list of items, and then you just provide this lambda, which is the child. It passes in each item that needs to basically render on the screen. So it's similar to recycler view. It'll only request the items it actually needs to display. I'll make a state, and then I can return the email view. So recycler view would probably be a lot more code. In this case, it's 4 lines of code. I can go over to my main activity. I have a little function to generate my list of emails. Let's see, mutable list. So I get my email list. I'll create a mutable state. And then I'll do the email list. Oh, actually, I don't need a state here. I just need the list. Makes that a little bit easier. And I can run the app and it will actually show the list. There we go. So we have the list here. Performance, not great. If I'm honest, it's fairly clunky and it's a little slow. So that's one issue. Another issue is that the state updates do not currently work with adapter list. So that's a really big issue. I've tried to fix this by moving the state up to the email list and then having the email list recompose, but that didn't work either. So there's currently a bug ticket open for this, and the compose folks are working on it. So hopefully soon it'll be good. But it is what it is for now. So next, I want an app bar up at the top. So I just have an email app bar composable. The component you're going to want to use is the top app bar. There's also a bottom app bar if you want bottom navigation. You just need to provide things like a title, navigation icon if you want it, actions if you need those. So maybe my text is, I don't know, faux mail because it's some fake email. My navigation icon, I can use an icon button for this one. Wrap this in an icon, vector assets, and we'll just leave the actions out for now. So this will basically make a toolbar for the top of your app. It'll provide your little navigation icon on the left, the title right next to it. When you want to add these things all together, you could try and like make it yourself, like put everything in a column and do all that, but fortunately there's a better way. So typically what you'll want to do is you'll want to make a composable function specifically for that screen. So in this case, I have an email list screen composable. Takes in my list of emails, takes in some navigation items, which I'll get to in a minute, but you're going to use a scaffold. Now the scaffold is the thing that kind of puts everything together. So you can provide your app bar in the top app bar property, and then the last lambda is the body. So this is just whatever you need to display in the application. So if I update my app to do the screen, I'll pass in the list, and I also have a function to generate navigation just so that works. This will show you the top app bar at the top of the screen. So you got your toolbar. You can modify the app bar however you want. You can provide like custom views inside for the text and everything. So it's really up to you what you want to do with it. Scaffold has a lot of other stuff that you can do. Most notably is the navigation drawer. So this is a rather large class, which is all for my email navigation. So it uses an adapter list. It has a sealed class to represent the different item types. It sort of switches across those and returns the different composable functions that are needed for that. I have a preview in here so I can actually show you what that'll look like. So this is the actual preview that'll get displayed. I have a link to all this so I can post everything. But in your scaffolds, come on. You pass in some drawer content. So this is where you want your email navigation. Pass in the nav items. And one other thing you're going to need is you're going to need some state. So there's a different way to make state. So you can use this state lambda. This is a shorthand way of making a mutable state. But the scaffold specifically needs a scaffold state. So this is is the drawer open or closed? And can you use gestures to open the drawer? So far we have gestures enabled, and we just need to pass this to the scaffold. Now this state, what it does that's different from before is it not only returns the state itself, but it returns a listener function. So you can use that kind of as an easy way of updating. But I should be able to use my gesture to open the drawer. It goes up and down. So looks good. Swipe it closed. Not gonna deal with the nav icon quite yet. Check out the code if you want to see how that works. I think the last thing I wanted to show is probably everybody's favorite material button, which is the floating action button. So there's a floating action button class you can use. Takes an on-click listener. You can throw an icon in it and it works. You can also use text if you want, or realistically any composable. It might just look a little bit weird if it's like too large or something. But all this really does is give you the style of a floating action button. It grabs the primary color from your theme, makes it circular, and stuff like that. When you want to use it, you just add the floating action button, say new email button. Not gonna respond to clicks just yet, but this will add it to the scaffold. It'll position it in the bottom right of the screen, and it gets you little ripple animations. There's also a position if you want. Which one is it? So there's the scaffold has a fab position. You can center it if you want, if that's what your design works with. So it'll just go right there. There's also center docked and end docked. So the scaffold also will work with a bottom navigation, and the dock will basically like cut out the bottom navigation for the floating action button. So if you want that in your design, it's pretty much included by default in Jetpack Compose. So that is pretty much my demo. Let me see. If you do want the code for this, I have a bit.ly link here, just Jetpack-compose-webinar. This will link you to the GitHub repo where the code is. I included a little bit of information about myself, as well as a bunch of links for if you're interested in learning more about Jetpack Compose. One great resource is the Kotlin Lang Slack. If you're in there, there's a Compose channel, which is great. There's some Google folks in there, so it's really easy to get feedback, like see what's new, what's working, and they are very open to bug tickets. So if you find bugs, please report them. Next, about me. So again, I'm Brian Gardner. You can follow me on Twitter if you like, or check out my website. I've been doing a blog series about Jetpack Compose. I think there's about 10 articles currently. So if you want a little bit more in-depth information, you can check those out. Also, again, I work for Big Nerd Ranch. We do consulting, Android consulting, iOS consulting. A lot of y'all probably know us from our books. I'm actually the co-author on the 4th edition Android programming guide. So check that out. There's a lot of Jetpack goodness in there. And we teach classes as well. So hit us up if you're interested. But thanks for watching.
Brian, fantastic job. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It was really exciting to see that in action and the way you presented that. I'm pretty sure if anybody's like me, they were pretty much glued to the screen the entire time. Loved it. Thank you so much for doing that. You're about to play question roulette as well. And so we've got Uli showing the screen of the most popular question. So I'm going to let you fire away on that.
Yeah, so top one, what have you found to be the benefits of Compose versus XML? I think the biggest benefit is XML is, like, I'm not a big fan. Like, it works, don't get me wrong. I tried Onco when it came out with the like JSON style stuff, and it wasn't great. I like being able to have like autocomplete in there. You can easily check the documentation for like the text component, say. You can see, all right, what exactly are all of the properties that this thing has? I don't have to go to developer.android.com and look up the documentation. It's just a very fluent interface. I like it a lot more than XML. I think it's a lot cleaner. Yes, you're going to have a lot more Kotlin code in there because you're going to have to create all of your views in Kotlin, but I think it's kind of worth it because you're gaining Kotlin code, but you're losing XML. So I'm a fan. Let's see, mobile development is shifting to declarative UIs, Flutter, Swift UI, and Compose. How mature do you see Compose, let's say in 1 year? I don't see it being release or production ready in 1 year, maybe beta if we're lucky. I'm hoping it goes alpha a little bit later this year, at least just out of dev, so things are a little bit more stable. But I'd say we get beta next year, maybe release by like Android Dev Summit next year. Fingers crossed. I dream one day we can use Compose alongside Swift UI to build cross-platform mobile apps using Kotlin multi-platform. Do you think this day will come? Yes, I definitely do. The nice thing about Compose is that it's open source and you can basically look at all the commits that they're doing to the project in sort of real time. One recent commit, they were specifically adding functionality for desktop UIs. So I don't think there's a reason to do that if they're not targeting some sort of multi-platform. So I have a gut feeling that Compose along with Kotlin multi-platform will kind of be a sort of cross-platformy way to build applications. Best live coding demo, thank you very much. I was super nervous about this. I haven't really done live coding before, so appreciate it. Is it possible to combine regular UI widgets and composable functions widgets? Is it a good idea? Yes, there is ways of combining both composable widgets and regular platform widgets. There are some things that just aren't in Compose yet. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an example, but there are ways of basically saying, all right, so in a platform UI, like this container holds a composable widget and vice versa. So in this composable function, this is like a platform widget I want to add in there. So is it a good idea? At this point, we're kind of forced to. So if there's something that's not available, you kind of have to use it. But in the future, when everything is composed, I don't think you would want to go that route. What are the differences in terms of performance between native apps UI and Compose apps UI? That's actually a good question. I'm not entirely sure how Compose is built under the hood. I want to say it's native component. Well, no, they're not native components, I don't think, because they're not platform types. So they're probably doing something similar to Flutter, sort of redoing it, maybe. I haven't noticed any real performance difference except for the adapter list that's real clunky right now. But they keep making it better after each release. So I definitely think things will get smoother as we go forward. Let's see, how do you do navigation with Compose? Right now, it is very similar to the way you do regular navigation. You would have to like pass a listener function down that fires off an intent or whatever. There is talk about Compose working very closely with the navigation architecture component, but that stuff is not out yet. But I think that will make it much easier when it does come out. It'll be a lot easier instead of kind of fiddling with listeners and stuff like that. How does Compose compare to Flutter's widgets? So my experience with Flutter is very, very limited. But from what I've seen, it seems very similar. You're declaring things in code. The state like refreshing seems kind of similar. The one major difference is Compose doesn't have the hot reload, unfortunately. So you do have to like build the project and wait for the preview to catch up, or like run the app and wait for the emulator. So that is one way Flutter is a little bit better. When do you recommend to use Compose for small views, whole screens? I would recommend it for like an entire screen, at least if like when it gets better, like beta at least. But if you're going to go with Compose, I see no reason not to go like all the way with it. How's testing with Compose? Yes, I don't actually know. As of right now, I don't believe there are any testing tools with Compose, so that is kind of a bummer. I do think that like making UIs the way I was doing it, sort of bottom up. I don't know much about React either, but it seems very similar to like React components. So I'm assuming the way you test React components, it'll be very similar to the way you test Compose components. And if your views are very dumb, then they should be like fairly easy to test, or kind of pointless to test. I wouldn't test my sender function because it just displays some text. Why? Good question. When we can create a view in XML in a few minutes, why spend an hour to achieve the same design? Not considering build and push, what we try to fix. My main thing is, again, I'm not a big fan of the XML. Yes, I'm very comfortable with it. I can like whip up XML designs very quickly, but not having to do XML makes me happy inside. So I'm a fan of that. Also, like I mentioned before, not having to dig into like the documentation if I need something. Like if I don't know an attribute, I have to go look up the documentation because I can't really just find it in Android Studio. Whereas with Compose, I can like click through to the declaration for the text or the adapter list and like find the actual things that I need there. Where to keep the reusable composable functions in the activity that uses it or some common class or somewhere else. I would do these very similarly to a regular custom view. So you'd have your own class for that custom view, most likely declaring the main function up at the top. So for like my email view, that would be the function at the very top. All of the functions below that would just be specific for that one particular view. So the sender text doesn't need to really be used anywhere else except the email view, so it should be in the same file, likely private, since it's not needed. Definitely don't want to keep it in the activity because activities tend to be a little bloated as it is. So just keep them in their own files. Oh, that was not the right one. So I think what it was is with the creation of Compose, will it work with data binding? I'm not sure about data binding. I kind of doubt it, just because it kind of solves a different problem. Data binding's whole thing is like you're going from XML to a Java representation of your view, and you don't want to have to call find view by ID for everything and like call all of the setters. Compose doesn't really work that way because you're kind of declaring everything anyways. Like data binding, I don't think is necessarily needed for that. Are you enjoying Valorant? Yes, I am. I am not good at it at all, but it's very fun. Does Compose help with setting up screen relative layout / constraints? I haven't looked into that too much, so I'm not entirely sure. Compose is going to get support for constraint layout, so you can actually build a constraint layout in Compose. That's one case that I'm not a big fan with Compose right now, just because you basically have to build the constraint set manually. There's no graphical editor for it yet, which is not fun. So maybe they'll add a graphical editor for that at some point. But at this point, I would kind of stay away from constraint layout. Sharing styles between composables. Yeah, so the styles for Compose are different than your typical platform styles. So as far as I know, there's no way of like grabbing an XML style and applying it to a Compose function, unfortunately. So you kind of have to declare the styles manually. I mean, you could create like a master file of all of your styles and put them in there. Another thing you can do is you can theme your application. So all apps get like the material theme at the top level, but it's very like restricting right now. You get like header 1 through 6, like subtitle text, body text, stuff like that. So that's one area I would like to see Compose get a little bit better.
Brian, let's take one more question, okay?
All right. Have you tried Splitties from Lewis? It's better than Onco. I have not. I'll actually have to look into that. I didn't really like Onco. I didn't feel like it had any benefit over XML except the fact that it wasn't XML. So I'll have to take a look at Splitties.
All right.
Thanks for all the
Brian,
questions, everyone.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you being here. It was, I think, a fantastic kickoff to the entire, not only the Jetpack series, but also to the series that we're starting with our Kotlin Advanced Kotlin series, as well as our multi-platform series, as well as the hands-on and in-depth. So thank you for being here. Feel free to click off your camera at any time, Brian. Just want to say a big shout out. Thanks so much to Marcos. Also, apologies, in the first slide, I forgot the S on the name, but Marcos for Jetpacks for You and I, Divya on Camera X, and Brian Gardner on Become a Composer. Those were all really just fantastic presentations. We're excited about the next lineup coming up, as you can see here again on April 30th on our Advanced Kotlin series. And remember that you can always check back, hopefully tomorrow or the next day, to droidcon.com to find the video from this session and all others, also from past droidcon events. We would love to have you all back in the future for more of our series and look forward to great things to come. With that said, we would love to say goodbye. In the chat function, there is a link to a survey. We'd love to have your input to help us make this a better series and more useful for you and keep refining what we're doing. So much love to you, to our wonderful Android community from the droidCon global team, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.